Under the vast, wind-swept skies of Arizona, the land breathed in silence. Nothing moved except the dry whisper of desert grass and the low creak of the windmill on Kerrigan Ranch. The dust there didn't settle. It lingered like old grief. The porch boards groaned under the weight of a man who hadn't spoken more than 10 words to another soul in 3 years. Bo Kerrigan sat in his weathered rocking chair, rifle across his knees, hat pulled low against the blaze of the setting sun. His silhouette was cut sharp by the golden light, a monument to solitude. A tin coffee cup rested on the floor beside him, long since emptied. He hadn't bothered to refill it. The beans were near gone anyway, and so was the will to care. Every morning he woke with the same thought. Maybe today the past will loosen its grip. And every night it held him tighter. Inside, the ranch house was too big for one man. Dust clung to corners, cobwebs draped the rafters, and the long dining table bore the untouched place settings of people who never returned. A woman's shawl still hung by the door, sun-bleached and stiff. Her scent, once honey and lavender, was gone, burned away by time and grief. The last fire he'd built in the hearth was on the night they died. After that, the house went cold. Bo wasn't always this way. Once he had been the kind of man who laughed too loud, who kissed his wife in public just to see her blush, who tossed his son into the air like he weighed nothing, even when the boy had long outgrown it. But the war took parts of him, and what was left the outlaws finished. A winter raid, a scream in the dark, flames, smoke. When the sheriff came riding up the next morning, Bo was already digging graves. He built a fence so wide even ghosts would hesitate to cross it. Ranch hands came and went, hired from town, none lasting more than a season. Not because he was cruel. He was fair, fed them well, paid on time. But the silence was too loud, the emptiness too thick. The only things that stayed were his mule, a dog too old to hunt, and the memories that crept out after sundown. That evening, as the sun folded itself into the horizon and bled orange across the desert floor, Bo spotted movement beyond the northern fence line. His hand didn't hesitate. Rifle raised, breath held. The dog beside him, Scout, lifted his head and whined low. Shapes emerged from the shimmering heat. First 2, then 4, then 10. They came slowly, not in a charge, but in something else, exhaustion. Men, women, and children. Faces darkened by sun and dirt, their expressions unreadable but solemn. A patch. Bo's jaw tensed. His grip on the rifle tightened. They stopped just outside his fence. The leader stepped forward, tall, broad-shouldered, a face carved by time and hardship. He said nothing for a long while, just looked at Bo with eyes too tired for defiance and too proud for pleading. "We do not ask for your land," he said finally. His voice was gravel and dignity. "Only your fence." Bo said nothing. He didn't lower the rifle. Scout growled low but stayed beside him. The wind shifted. It carried the scent of unwashed bodies, scorched earth, and something else, fear. Maybe, not of him, of whatever they were running from. One of the children stumbled and dropped to his knees, panting, face streaked with dust and sweat. A woman, likely the mother, reached down and lifted him wordlessly, her hand trembling. Bo's mind flooded with thoughts he didn't want. Memories of another child, another wife. He pushed them down. "You lost?" he asked flatly. The leader shook his head. "We're not children." "Then you know where you are." "Yes." A pause. "We've been followed. We only need one night. Shelter behind your fence." Bo studied them. 10 of them. Worn, half-starved. No weapons visible, though he wasn't fool enough to think they didn't have any. But he didn't see warriors. He saw what the desert hadn't yet killed. He could have said no. He should have. The townsfolk would call him mad if they knew. They already thought him half wild. Letting Apaches stay on his land? That would tip them fully into certainty. He stepped off the porch, boots hitting the dirt with a finality that made Scout stand. He didn't speak as he approached the fence, didn't lower the rifle until he was only feet away from the leader. Two men stared at one another, unmoving, unspeaking. Then Bo nodded, once, toward the old cattle shed. "You don't touch the house," he said. "You don't touch the well. We won't. No fires." The Apache nodded. Bo turned and walked back to the porch. He didn't watch them settle in. Didn't want to see their faces, especially. Not the children. He poured himself another cup of coffee, even though it tasted like rust, and sat back down. The rocking chair groaned under his weight. Scout trotted out toward the shed, circling the newcomers once before lying down in the dirt between them and the house, watching, guarding, or maybe judging. Hard to say with dogs. Night fell slowly. The stars came out in patches, flickering like the blinking eyes of gods too old to care. The Apaches moved with quiet discipline, bedding down without a word. No fire, no laughter, just breathing, low, careful. Inside the house, Bo stared at the empty place at the table again. He touched the edge of the plate that hadn't moved in 3 years. The woman's shawl stirred slightly in the draft. He hadn't let anyone stay the night since the burial. Not even when winter froze the cattle trough solid and left travelers stranded. He didn't owe anyone a damn thing. He still didn't so why the hell had he let them stay? The next morning came with a gray sky and the kind of silence that usually meant trouble. Bo was already out before the sun had lifted. Fence line needed checking. Chickens needed feeding. A man needed things to do, or else his thoughts would drown him. He passed the shed on the way to the barn. The Apache were all ready. Awake, one of the boys, couldn't have been more than 12, was hauling water from the far trough. A girl sat near him, peeling the thorns from a cactus. Efficient, quiet, UNBO2HERED. Bo grunted but didn't stop. From the corner of his eye, he saw the tall woman, the one who had helped the child last night, watching him. Her face was plain, sharp around the jaw, with a scar across one cheek. Her eyes held something harder than anger. Survival. He nodded slightly. She didn't return it. Later, when he sat on the porch sharpening his knife, the Apache leader approached alone. "I am Nanton," he said. "I didn't ask." Nanton remained still. "We'll be gone by tomorrow." Bo glanced up. "That? What you promised them? Your people?" Nanton's jaw twitched. "They're not my people. They're what's left of them." Silence stretched between them. The wind picked up. A hawk circled overhead. "There's water behind the barn," Bo said at last. "And some tools in the shed if you need to fix anything." Nanton looked at him a moment longer, then turned without another word. Bo watched him go. Something inside his chest shifted, not much, but enough to notice. Like a lock turning halfway, the dog barked suddenly. Loud, one sharp warning toward. The ridge to the west. Bo stood, scanning the horizon. Dust. Not natural. Too focused. Moving too fast. Riders. He narrowed his eyes. Maybe 3. Maybe more. He stepped back inside and reached for his rifle again. They'd come looking for someone. He didn't know yet whether he'd stand with the people in his shed or turn them out to the wolves. But the land remembered everything. And today, so did he. The next morning broke under a low sky, thick with ash-colored clouds that pressed down on the desert like a warning. The kind of sky that made old bones ache and dogs grow restless. Bo Kerrigan rolled a cigarette with the precision of a man who had done it 10,000 times, then lit it with a match he struck against the porch post. He squinted toward the shed. They were still there. The Apaches moved like shadows, deliberate and spare, as though wasting motion would offend the gods. No fires, no talking, just movement quiet and constant. A woman poured water over her hands and passed it to the next. A child dragged a broken fence post from the edge of the pasture. One of the older men used a bone-handled knife to scrape dried meat into strips. They made no demands, asked no questions. Bo hadn't heard a single word from them since last night. He wasn't sure if that unnerved him or impressed him. Scout padded across the yard, ears twitching. The dog kept his distance from the group, but he watched them the way a smart mutt watches a coyote pack, curious, cautious, not entirely convinced they wouldn't bite. The mule, however, had taken to them with uncharacteristic generosity, even letting one of the children scratch behind its ears. Bo made a mental note to keep an eye on the beast's feed. He didn't trust anything that changed behavior too fast. Mid-morning brought the sound of workwood being split, nails driven. He stepped off the porch, hand resting near his hip, and walked toward the noise. Behind the shed, the Apache were repairing a section of his collapsed fence. Two men lifted rails into place, while a boy fetched nails from a tin bucket. The tall woman saying, he remembered Nanton calling her wiped sweat from her brow with the edge of her tunic, then returned to lifting a heavy post into alignment. He opened his mouth to speak, but found no words. What could he say? Thank you? Why? Stop. None of it made sense. Instead, he muttered, that's mesquite, hard as stone. You'll need to wet it before you bend it. Sayen looked up briefly, not startled but measuring. We've worked worse, she said. Her voice was low, accented, but firm. She didn't smile. Bo nodded once and turned away. He found Nanton near the well, adjusting the windmill's lever. The old gears groaned in protest, but turned nonetheless. The man looked over his shoulder as Bo approached, but didn't stop working. You plan on fixing my whole damn ranch? Bo asked. Nanton wiped his hands and shrugged. Better to work than wait. Wait for what? For whatever's coming. Bo didn't reply. He didn't have to. They both knew trouble, didn't ask permission. It came like a dust storm sudden, brutal and blind. That night, Bo laid his rifle across his lap as he sat by the stove. No one had asked to come inside, and he hadn't invited anyone. But he left the door unlatched. That was as much a gesture as he was capable of. He watched the flames dance behind the iron grate, thinking about Sayen's scar, the quiet precision of the children, the calm in Nanton's voice. He remembered stories from the war. Men claiming the Apaches scalped women and carved up settlers. He'd believed some of it, maybe still did. But what he saw now didn't fit the stories. These weren't savages. They were survivors. Same as him. Damaged, hardened, carrying grief that no one else could see. A sudden knock cracked the silence. Bo didn't move. The door creaked open. Sayen stepped inside, just one step, backlit by starlight. There's someone out there, she said, on the ridge. Bo rose in an instant, grabbing his rifle. He followed her out, heart quickening. The night wind cut sharp against his face as they crossed the yard. Nanton stood near the shed, peering through a long, narrow spyglass. There, he said, handing it to Bo. Bo raised it. In the distance, silhouetted against the moonlight, he saw 3 riders sitting motionless atop the ridge. Watching. He lowered the glass. Friends of yours? He asked. Nanton didn't answer. Did you steal something? O's voice was sharper now. Kill someone? Sayen's eyes flashed. We defended ourselves. From who? Men with badges, she said, but no law. That stirred something deep in Bo's memory. A crooked sheriff, a burned wagon, a flash of his wife's red dress in the dirt. He looked back at the ridge. You think they'll come tonight? He asked. They're patient, Anton said. Like wolves, they'll wait. Try to starve us out. Bo turned the possibilities over in his head. If he turned them out, they'd be picked off like deer in open field. If he sheltered them, he'd be inviting fire on his roof. But the sky held no mercy. Only stars, sharp and cold. The next morning was heavy. Heat clung to the air before sunrise, the way bad omens do. Bo took his rifle and rode out toward the ridge. Scout followed close. He found the prints where the horses had stood. Deep, warm. These weren't travelers. They'd been waiting a long while. Watching, planning. He returned to the ranch. Began boarding up the windows. Sayen. Approached as he hammered the last plank across the kitchen frame. You believe us now? She asked. Bo didn't look at her. Don't mean I like it. We didn't come to bring trouble. You brought it anyway. She stepped closer, and for the first time, her voice softened. Do you think you're the only one who lost everything? Bo stopped hammering. She reached down, pulled her tunic aside slightly, and showed the edge of another scar. A long, puckered line that ran from her hip to her ribs. They took my husband, burned our home. My daughter was 5. Her throat clenched. They buried her under a cottonwood tree. We marked it with feathers. Bo looked at her, really looked. The anger that had lived so long behind his ribs began to flicker. He wanted to say something kind, but he didn't know how anymore. Instead, he said, There's a rifle in the attic. You shoot? Sayen nodded. Better than you. That night, Bo sat at the table with a tin plate of beans. He poured 2 cups of coffee. After a moment, Nansen stepped in and took the other seat. Sayan remained by the doorway, eyes on the dark beyond the windows. The old medicine man, Chaska, entered quietly and sat on the floor, muttering prayers to no god Bo had ever known. A wind picked up outside, and with it came the scent of horses. Leather. Smoke. Bo reached for his rifle. The first shot came from the barn. He bolted upright, knocking the chair over, and raced into the night. Flames licked the far corner of the hayloft. The barn was burning. Gunfire split the silence. Bo dropped low and fired into the shadows, not caring who he hit. Someone screamed. Scout barked, snarling. Sayan and Nanten appeared beside him, firing with precision. The children were herded. Behind the shed, Chaska stood unmoving in the firelight, chanting something no one understood. A figure charged from the dark, revolver raised. Bo turned and fired. The man dropped, and Bo froze. There on the man's neck, visible even in the firelight, was a tattoo, a coiled snake wrapped around a noose. Bo's hands began to shake. That mark. He knew it. Years ago, one of the men who raided his ranch had worn it. He had chased them. Killed 2. The rest vanished. And now one stood at his fence again. The fire burned out by morning, but the barn was gone. 3 of the attackers lay dead. 1 had escaped. Bo buried them beyond the ridge. Sayen found him kneeling there, hat in hand. You knew him, she said. He nodded. They were part of the gang, the ones who took my family. So now you know why we ran. Bo's voice broke. I'm sorry. Sayen placed a hand on his shoulder, not for comfort, but recognition. When they walked back together, the children were already repairing what had burned. Nanten stood guard at the gate, silent, watchful. Bo looked around his land, and, for the first time in years, he realized he wasn't the only one who had bled for it. He wasn't the only one who belonged to it, and maybe, just maybe, could still be home. Bo stood in the ashes of his barn, hat clenched in his fist, eyes locked on the blackened ground. The sky above was a blank, windless gray. Smoke still curled from the debris, ghost-like tendrils that reached toward nothing. His mule, singed, but alive, stood trembling near the fence, eyes wide and wild. He didn't speak to it. There were no words that made sense after a night like that. The Apaches were already rebuilding. Sayan's tunic was scorched at the hem, her hair tangled with ash, but she hauled lumber like it weighed nothing. Nantan moved in silence, organizing the salvage. Boards not yet burned, nails that could be straightened, tools blackened, but usable. The children worked without complaint. Even the old man Chaska dragged debris away. Wheezing but steady Bo watched them with a hollowness inside he hadn't felt since the graves were dug on the East Hill. He had buried the 3 dead men with little ceremony, marked their resting place with rocks, and left the shovels leaning against a broken fence post. They didn't deserve prayers. He hadn't said any for his own blood. He wasn't about to waste breath on bastards with no names and snake tattoos. Still, something twisted in his gut, a feeling he didn't know what to do with. It wasn't fear, not exactly. It wasn't hate either. It was closer to shame. They had come for the Apaches, but they had brought a piece of his past with them. A mark he thought time had erased. Sayan approached as he tossed a scorched plank onto the pile. "We should ride out," she said. "Tonight, before they come back?" Bo shook his head. "They'll follow you, hunt you down piece by piece. They already are. They know this land. I know it better." She folded her arms across her chest, eyes scanning the ruined barn. "Then what? We stay? Wait for more?" Bo lit a cigarette and leaned against what was left of the fence. "We don't wait," he said. "We prepare." That afternoon, he drew a map in the dirt, pointing out high ground, choke points, and the arroyo where water had once run thick. He showed them where he had placed hunting traps years ago, most rusted now, but repairable. He explained how the wind moved through the canyon, how sounds carried, how shadows could lie if he didn't pay attention. Sayan listened like a soldier, Nantan like a tactician. The children, for once, were quiet. Later, Nantan spoke. "You were a soldier once," Bo nodded. "Long time ago. You remember it all. Some things don't fade." That night, they set up defenses. Trip lines, pitfalls, broken glass from the shattered barn windows placed at choke points. The old tools were sharpened, rifles cleaned, knives tested. Sayan refused to rest, but Bo made the children sleep in shifts. They had done enough. When the first rider appeared on the southern ridge 2 nights later, Bo wasn't surprised. He watched from the porch, the barrel of his rifle resting on the rail. A second rider joined the first, then a third. They didn't approach, just lingered on the high ground like wolves deciding how to break a fence. Bo didn't fire. Let them think he was scared. Let them underestimate him. The next morning, Nantan joined him near the barn ruins. "They'll wait until we're high." "Tired," he said. "Until we start making mistakes," Bo nodded. "Let's make sure they make the first one." They did dot at dusk. A pair of them rode toward the fence, slow and cocky. One dismounted and walked with a saunter that said he'd never been told. No, in his life. He shouted something, but the wind took it. Sayan, perched on the roof of the tool shed, raised her rifle. Bo raised his hand. "Not yet." The rider kicked over the water barrel by the gate, laughed. Bo fired one shot. It wasn't meant to hit. It was a warning. A hole appeared in the dirt at the man's feet. The laughter stopped. They rode off. That night, it rained out, not a storm, just a steady whisper on the dry earth, like the land itself was holding its breath. Bo stood outside, letting the water soak through his shirt, dripping from his beard. He hadn't felt rain in months. It smelled like memory-wet wood, damp horses, the scent of his wife's hair after she bathed under the pump. Sayan stood beside him. "They'll come tomorrow," she said. Bo nodded. You scared? No. Liar. She gave him a sideways glance, but she smiled just slightly. It was the first time he'd seen anything close to warmth on her face at dawn. The ground shook not from nature, but from hooves. They came fast. 6 men on horseback, rifles raised, mouths open in wordless screams. Dust rose behind them like smoke from a fire. One of them wore a red scarf around his neck. Another had a scar down the side of his face. Pink and raw. Bo took the first shot. The man with the scarf dropped, tumbling from his horse in a graceless heap. Sayan's rifle cracked. One of the riders veered into a tripline, his horse crashing hard. The man didn't get up. Bo shouted, "Now!" And the traps sprung, ropes tightening, glass snapping under boots. The remaining 4 scattered. 2 made for the shed. 1 vanished into the brush. The last one, the one with the scar, charged straight at the porch, pistol in each hand. Bo met him head on. They fired at the same time. The man's shot missed. Bo's didn't. The rider's momentum carried him forward, even as the life drained from his eyes. He hit the steps and collapsed in a tangle of limbs and guns. Then everything went still. No more shouts. No more gunfire. Just wind and the groan of a wounded horse. Bo lowered his rifle, panting. Saye, and moved from the roof, sliding down with grace. Nanten emerged from behind the trough, checking the children. 3 dead, 2 missing, 1 dying. They found him in the weeds, gutshot, begging for water. Bo stood over him. "Why'd you come here?" he asked. The man coughed, spitting blood. "They said you were hiding them. Said you had red gold buried here, Apache trinkets." Bo crouched beside him. "You came for treasure?" The man tried to nod. "Just thought it'd be easy." Bo stared for a long time, then stood. He let the man bleed out. Afterward, the ranch was quiet. Smoke curled from the spent rifles. Blood seeped into the earth. They buried the bodies far. From the graves on the hill, Bo cleaned his rifle with steady hands. Sayan brought him coffee. Still hot, Nanten sat in the shade, stitching a new patch onto a ruined saddlebag. The children played near the fence, tossing pebbles, their laughter soft and cautious. Bo watched them, and something inside him let go. The rage he'd carried for years, the young, sharp-edged grief that had defined every breath it shifted. It didn't vanish, but it stopped cutting. Later that evening, he stood by the edge of the property, looking out toward the hills. The riders wouldn't return. Not now. Not after what they'd lost. Sayan joined him, arms crossed. "You stayed," she said. "You fought." "So did you." Bo looked at her, really looked. She was scarred, tired, bone-deep weary. But she stood tall, whole, fierce. He didn't say thank you. She didn't need it. Instead, he said, "You think about staying?" Her eyes scanned the land, the house, the fence. "Maybe," she said. Behind them, the wind picked up. A storm. Just life. The fire had left a black scar across the ranch, but the land had already started to reclaim what it could. Ash settled into the soil, and green tufts poked through near the water trough. Birds returned before men did. They always did. Bo stood beneath the old oak near the hill where 3 graves waited. One of them now bore a fresh wooden marker, no name, just a carved feather in the center. Chaska had died quietly 2 nights after the last attack, breath slipping away like smoke in a breeze. He hadn't spoken since the battle, just stared at the flames until his heart gave up. Sayan carved the feather herself. She didn't cry, not then. Not when she laid the feather stone in the ground. But Bo saw the tightness in her hands when she placed the dirt over him, her lips moving in a silent prayer to gods the desert still feared. Bo found himself watching her more often now, not out of suspicion, but out of a kind of quiet awe. There was something in the way she moved that reminded him of his wife, not in appearance or even manner, but in presence. Sayan didn't need to say much to fill a room. She simply existed fully, like every heartbeat was connected to the ground. Itself, the ranch was slowly coming back to life. They rebuilt the barn with what they had and what they could find. Town folk didn't ask questions when Bao rode in to buy timber, though their eyes lingered longer than usual. Rumors traveled faster than horses out here, and they'd heard enough whispers about Apache blood and gunfire to keep their greetings short. He didn't care. Let them talk. The central conflict had changed. It was no longer Bao versus the ghosts of his past, or even Bao against the men who had taken his family. It was Bao against himself, the parts that still whispered that he didn't deserve to feel anything again, that he was meant to rot on this land like some old fence post long forgotten. But each morning he woke to children laughing, to Nantan hammering nails into the barn roof, to Sayan boiling cactus fruit over a low flame and offering him a bite with one raised eyebrow. Life was happening here again, with or without his permission. One evening, as the sun melted into the mountains and cast long shadows across the field, Bo found Sayan standing by the eastern fence line. She held her knife low, carving small notches into a fresh post. "You counting something?" he asked, voice low. She didn't look at him. "Memories." He stepped closer. "You got that many?" She gave him the hint of a smile. "Too many. Some days I wish I could trade them for someone else's." He leaned on the post beside her. "You think that would change anything?" "Maybe not, but it might make the nights quieter." They stood in silence for a long time. The breeze picked up, carrying the scent of sagebrush and old firewood. Sayan finally said, "You ever think about leaving this place?" "Used to. Thought I'd ride until I couldn't remember where I'd been. But the wind always pushed me back here." She looked at him now. "And now?" He hesitated. "Ben, now I think the wind knows my name." That night, Nantan called a small gathering by the fire. They sat in a circle bow, Sayan, the children, Nantan, two of the younger men. The stars above blinked like ancient watchers, and the flames cast their faces in gold and shadow. Nantan spoke for the first time in days. "There are other places we could go," he said, "but none safer than here. If Bo allows it, we stay." All eyes turned to him. Bo shifted in his seat. The dog, now healed from a wound on its flank, lay at his feet, ears flicking with the wind. "You asking for permission?" Bo asked. "I'm offering you a choice." Bo looked around, the land, the people. His porch with its repaired steps, the fence line no longer broken, the barn roof half redone, the graves on the hill. He thought about how much he had lost, and how much he had regained without even realizing it. "You can stay," he said. The fire cracked. No one cheered, but the weight lifted from their shoulders like storm clouds parting. One of the children, a boy named Niall, grinned and said something in Apache to Sayan. She smiled and nodded. Bo felt it then. The shift. He wasn't alone anymore. Not by accident, but by choice. The following days brought work. Real work. Fence posts went up. Troughs were fixed. The cattle, what was left of them, herded and branded. Sayan proved better with a rope than any ranch hand Bo had ever hired. Nantan organized shifts like a foreman, assigning tasks with a kind of gentle command. Even the old dog seemed to accept the change, napping beside the children under the wagon's shade. But nothing stayed peaceful for long in the west. One morning, a rider appeared on the horizon, alone, dust trailing behind like a serpent. Bo saw him first, rifle already in hand. Sayan joined him on the porch, scanning the figure as the man neared. It became clear he wasn't a threat, at least not an immediate one. Clothes worn, hat battered, a telegram in his hand. Bo met him at the gate. "What do you want?" "Names." "Wilcox, from the post down near Dry Creek. Got a message for you. Urgent." Bo took the envelope, tore it open. It was from the federal office in Tucson. It spoke of warrants, a bounty on surviving Apache fugitives from an incident near Bitter Ridge, accusations of violence. Armed resistance. His stomach clenched. They hadn't forgotten. And they were coming again, this time not as thieves or mercenaries, but with papers, with law behind them. He folded the letter slowly. Wilcox cleared his throat. "You harboring any strangers here, Mr. Kerrigan?" O looked him dead in the eye. "Just family." The rider hesitated. "Can't hide them forever." O stepped closer, voice low. "Don't need forever, just long enough." The man rode off, muttering. Bo returned to the porch. Cheyenne was waiting. He handed her the letter. She read it, jaw tightening. "What do we do?" she asked. Bo looked out across the field, where Nanton was loading hay onto a cart, and Niall chased a dog through the dust. "We don't run," he said. "We make them see us." "You think they'll care?" "No," Bo said, "but they'll see the difference between what they were told and what's true." Cheyenne folded the letter and set it in the fire. Bo placed a hand on her shoulder. "They'll come as men. We meet them as people." When the officials did arrive, 3 men in polished boots and stern expressions, they found the ranch well run. The Apaches working openly. They asked questions. Bo answered simply. They couldn't arrest a people for rebuilding a barn. Couldn't shoot a woman for herding cattle. Couldn't drag away children with dirt on their cheeks and nothing in their hands but rope and apples. They left uneasy, promising to report back, promising to monitor. But they left. That night, Bo stood once more on the porch, watching the wind bend the grass along the fence line. Cheyenne joined him, her shoulder brushing his. He didn't move away. "You think they'll come again?" she asked. He nodded. "Always." "Do. But we'll still be here." He looked at her. "Yes," he said. "We will." The wind whispered through the beams overhead. It moved around them like a voice half heard, like memory. And Bo finally let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, the land hadn't just remembered him. Maybe it had forgiven him too.